If you don't have a custody order in place and there's no case filed in your case, then the other parent on their custodial time can abscond to another country. What is going on, everybody? My name's Mark Real Jr., the Father's Rights Attorney, and you are watching another episode of the Father's Rights Playbook. On today's episode, we answer a question from our DMs. This one specifically came from Facebook in regards to passports and nationalities. My wife and I were married in Mexico. He's a U.S. citizen and I'm British. Our daughter was born in Mexico, but has passports from both of us. Things turned ugly at Christmas and we got into a physical fight, and I fled the house for some days with our baby. She's an alcoholic and drinks daily. We decided to give things a go and she would get sober and go to therapy. This lasted a month sober before things fell off and the arguing continued. I filmed her being drunk and aggressive one night. A few days later, she snatched my phone and threw it away. I got the Mexican police involved and she moved out of the house. We didn't know what to do, and I refused to go to the UK on a tourist visa. So we agreed that I would go to the US while the paperwork processed, and then I would join her in the US to co-parent. Since then, she has said she's not prepared to do the green card, but is now saying that she didn't agree for me to bring the child to the UK and is accusing me of abduction. This is a situation where things can get a little bit complicated when it comes to international child custody cases. So we have someone with a UK passport, someone with a US passport. Sounds like the child's fairly young but has both, and a situation occurred in Mexico. In regards to what was alleged, sounds a lot like domestic violence. That could be rather challenging to bring in a US court if you were to move over here. It happened in another country, you're now in safety, and you would be electing to come back into the situation. And this went on for 5 or 6 more paragraphs, but part of the question is, you want to co-parent, you want to work with her, but you are concerned that she has her own passport for the child and that she could flee the country. Understand that I can't necessarily answer if you were to file the custody request in the UK, what would occur. Since you're living there, if you wanted to live in the UK, I'd probably advise you to start the process there, because if you come to the US, you're going to have to be in the United States for 6 months. You're going to have to be 3 months in the county you file in here in California before you can file for paternity action, because until you get a child custody order, both parents technically have full legal and physical custody, which means they can do whatever they want, whenever they want. If you don't have a custody order in place and there's no case filed in your case, then the other parent on their custodial time that you've mutually agreed on can abscond to another country. They can go to a country that's not a Hague Convention country. Japan's the most common one. We also recently had a case that involved Russia is not a party to the Hague Convention. Now, most of Europe and most of North America and South America are parties to the Hague Convention, but it can be very challenging and a time-consuming process. From a logistical standpoint, it makes a whole lot of sense for you to file for custody, if possible, in the UK, where you're currently at, and start the process there. If you were to come to the US, understand you're going to have a period of time outside of filing for a domestic violence restraining order in the States, which you could do right away. You're going to have a waiting time period before you can actually file here in California, which brings the risk of her absconding to another country. And even going to Mexico with a kid can be a very complicated and challenging process to go through the Hague process to get the kid back. So if you really want to come to the United States, you just need to understand the risks. There may be a period of time where you don't have a custody order and she technically can do whatever she wants and she can utilize that passport. But once you would get into a custody case, you can request passports be held by one of you guys' attorneys, or that there be no international travel, which would be a very reasonable request given that there's at least 3 countries involved. It's going to be risky to come back to the US, especially if you want to co-parent, if you want to give her time with the kid. So my advice is, if you're not willing to take that risk, unfortunately for the time being, I would say file in the UK, go through that process, U.S. may be challenging to get personal jurisdiction over her, but at least you can have some sort of custody arrangement in place. International cases are almost never black and white from my vantage point when the U.S. is clearly not the home country at the moment or clearly wouldn't have jurisdiction at the moment. So challenging time, not something I'm envious of, but understand if you come back to the U.S., there are risks involved in that. There's going to be a time period before you can get a custody order that prevents her from utilizing that passport. I hope you found this educational. I hope this answered the questions that you had. And once again, I'm Mark Real Jr., the Father's Rights Attorney, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Father's Rights Playbook.